Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us. This is a really exciting moment. So hello and welcome to this first webinar on the art of pitching for Palabra, a multimedia platform for NAHJ. It's an honor for me to be here today with you. I'm Johnny Cordova, NHJ board member and director for Region 7, which encompasses New Mexico, Colorado, Utah, Nevada, and of course, Arizona. Arizona being the home of Palabra's current managing editor, Valeria Fernández, here with us. And also with us right now, Palabra's first ever managing editor, Ricardo Sandoval Palos. So it's truly an honor. I'm very humbled. Palabra will soon turn 4 years old. It was launched on November 5th, 2019. And I remember it like it was yesterday because I had just become regional director. And look at Palabra now. It has grown exponentially. From its inception, Palabra broke the mold as an independent vehicle for freelancers to share their stories and the stories important to their communities. Palabra giving them the tools, resources, and support to elevate the quality of their work and amplify their voices. I'll close with this. From that first day when Palabra launched, and that has always stuck with me, through Palabra, we are reclaiming ownership of our own narrative, both by deciding what is newsworthy and by setting the standard for fair and accurate coverage of our communities. So now, here's Valeria, managing editor for Palabra.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm super excited to be here, to be joined by Ricardo Sandoval, who is like founding editorial, managing editor of Palabra, who was there from here. He has been here from the inception, and also by Johnny Cordova, who was the conspirator of starting this series of webinars. And we're going to have more on different arts. There's a one coming up on the art of fact checking for November 15th. So mark your calendars. And if you don't follow us in their newsletter, we'll put a link in there so you could keep up with the updates, the stories, and invitations to pitch for Palabra. We're always taking pitches. Now, as you know, as a freelancer and as a journalist, we're kind of towards the end of the year. So it's always a little harder at this time to place a story. So it's time to start thinking about the stories you'll pitch for next year. It's not too soon. It's actually the right time to like sort of plant the seeds. So in any case, another thing that Palabra has been doing is really try to set a high standard for paying in time and paying well to our freelancers. We really want to build community, and we hope to get much closer to you. Like Ricardo likes to say, we rarely turn down a pitch. We always like to have conversations, get on the phone, workshop your ideas. Another thing I wanted to say, I see somebody join us as a panelist. Hi, Andrea. Another thing I wanted to say is we will have a session for Q&A at the end, and you will see at the bottom a Q&A chat, and then you'll be able to add your questions. But if you have anything pressing that needs clarification, as Ricardo and I engage in this conversation, feel free to put it in the chat. And also feel free to let us know, where you're joining us from. And and then finally, Yunuen here, who's behind the scenes helping facilitate the webinar, will launch a pop-up survey to get to know you a little better. Oh, hi, Lorena from New York City. Welcome. Yes, so that'll be available. And then we want to get a sense of who's joining us. And it's really important, especially if many of you are freelancers. Having said all of that, I'm going to turn the rein here for Ricardo, maybe with a instigating question here. Ricardo, and feel free to like talk, go in whatever direction you want to go. But what is one of the most common mistakes that we do when we're pitching a story?
It's funny is because there's no exact science or art to a pitch. I think there are some guidelines that you should follow in the framework that you need to be in when you're going to be presenting your idea. But I'll tell you one thing that happens too often is we leave important things out. We don't give a complete picture that could probably help the editors who are making the decision decide whether they could use the story or not, right? And but it is a bit, it's a bit of a balance, because you don't want to give away the entire story, obviously, in your pitch, because then what are we buying, right? But I think it's important to give the editors enough where they can make an honest decision. And I think what happens is a lot of times we miss the mark on exactly what it is that the editors are looking for, right? Some pitches go way too long. Some are too short, right? Because then the editors are asking, what the heck is this story about? And then sometimes, too often, I've seen we make claims about the stories that we can't necessarily back up 100%. Now, obviously, when you're pitching a story, you're also suggesting that there's more reporting that you have to do. So if that's the case, if you don't have your story 100% locked up, or if you do have it 100% locked up, say so in the pitch. Say that I foresee, for example, a month or so of necessary reporting that's going to encompass the following sources beyond what I already have. Or if you already think that you have the complete story, you say, this is a complete story. I just need to do some additional interviewing, for example, and we need to do some fact checking. All right. And the other thing that I think people really need to take into consideration, what Palabra does and the way it does it, is that all stories that have major components that are serious, major stories, major features, investigative pieces, accountability pieces, they need to come, that first draft needs to be accompanied by a fact-checking file, annotations, footnotes, whatever. You can decide, you can work with the editors ultimately how that fact-checking process is going to initiate, but it starts with some annotation, be it footnotes or a fact-checking file that corresponds with pretty much everything you have in your story. So be ready for that, and even indicate in your pitch that you're prepared for that, and you have the necessary documents, and you know where they are, so you can start compiling pretty quickly a fact-checking file for the editors. Yeah.
So I'm sure we have here people with different levels of experience, right? So are you saying that before you pitch, you have to do reporting? What percentage of your reporting you have to have done in order to
I
feel
think,
like
and again, there's probably no set number, right? No set percentage, but what's important to know is when you feel like you've got the story. And there's a little bit of a nuance here, right? Because if you don't have a lot of experience in pitching a story, maybe you're just starting out as a journalist, but you have a damn good idea, a good story idea. Ride with the story idea, and even say this is a great story. Be honest and say, I'm a graduate student. I don't have a lot of resources, but I know where I can find the additional elements to make the story sing, right? So if you're honest in that respect, I think you can then count on Palabra to recognize, hopefully, the merit of the story and be as excited about the story as you are. And then together, Palabra with the journalist can decide, can even find some resources, say, to bring in a mentor, to bring in an editor early in the process to help you get to that point, right? So I would say that the most important thing you need to have, if you're going to call it a percentage, you'd probably want to at least report the story out to your satisfaction, that you're confident that you have the story. And usually that's at least 50% of it. Because a lot of times when you're convinced that you have the story, what's left is then finding the resources and the backing through a promised publication that you're going to be able to go out and interview the people who you need for the story to make it complete. So
when you do that reporting, Ricardo, to sort of land your story, how much do you also should do to really know? Because it might seem like, wow, I discovered this incredible thing. Like I remember working in a small newspaper here and being new and being like, wow, there's like 9,000 children created to be part of the foster system in Arizona. That is a huge number, you know, and it was to me like a huge discovery, right? And then I'll go and there's 3 other veteran reporters who have already went through the same thing and also thought the same thing. And it turns out it's like one of those things that you think you're the first one finding out, that's been repeatedly reported, right? How much due diligence should you do?
You need to do a fair amount of due diligence. You know, listen, I've been a journalist now, professional journalist for 43 years, if you can believe it. Yes, I'm that old. And I got to tell you that one of the things I've found, even in my own experience, and let me back up a little bit, because even if you're on staff somewhere, even if you're a staff writer at a newspaper, at a radio station, you're part of a news, a broadcast news outlet, you still have to pitch your story internally. And even your own editor is going to ask you a bunch of questions that are similar to the kind of give and take that you're going to get from palabra, right? So I found that oftentimes I would be really excited about the story, and I'd say, no one's done anything on this subject before. I just know it. And then I do a quick search and discover that, oops, a number of people have written about it. Okay. So you do need to do that kind of due diligence before you say this is a novel approach to a story, or this is a brand new story that no one knows about. Just be certain of that. And believe me, if you know a story, if you know an issue well enough, you'll have a good sense going into the reporting that this is a novel story. This is a first of its kind, right? The scoop, if you will. So I think you do need to do that just to be sure that what you're saying, you're on solid ground. So that takes a little reportage. Yeah.
And the next thing I'm thinking about that is like, okay, you find out someone else has done the reporting, let's say on my example, right, on the foster children, and you're automatically just, you know, very sad. This is the end of it. What would you suggest to do, and then how do you present that to the editor?
Well, I think listen, I think that a lot of this you can suss out before you even make the pitch, right? Then you're disappointed. Oh my gosh, I've seen 5 stories, and the New York Times has 5 years ago did a big story about this. But there's something that attracted you to that subject or that story in the first place. Go back to that and see if that's like a singular subject or a singular part of the story that has gone uncovered, that has gone unaccounted for. Do you have something new to say about this story? Do you have another element that's going to move the story even further than what has been reported so far? Or do you have something that's going to contradict the reporting that's been done so far? You can say, hey, I have new stuff, new documentation that tells us that the story that the New York Times did 5 years ago was wrong. Then that's a hell of a story, right? So again, that comes with being comfortable with your pitch, your idea, knowing your subject, having done ample research to know what's out there, and to know whether you need to pivot from your early idea, from your first idea, to something that tells us something different and new about the story. I'll give you an example. I mean, the way we used to do it at NPR, I used to edit I was the supervising editor for Morning Edition. And we would ask ourselves all the time when we were preparing conversations between our hosts and guests on the stories, we would ask ourselves, hey, this story's been out there. What can we bring to the piece here? We only have 3 minutes, or we only have 4 minutes, or whatever. So let's find something new that moves the ball forward, right? And pick on that and have that be the feature, the focal point of our entry into the story. So you have to sort of approach it in that fashion. Yeah.
What happens, Ricardo, because I see this a lot, and I have said this in my own pitches. Oh no, it's just that, it's not being covered in the mainstream. It's not covered right. And it's almost like a throwaway line that it becomes like a commonplace. And as an editor, you're like,
Yeah.
So what word of caution do you have on that?
Well, listen, the biggest caution there is that when in most cases, when you're pitching a freelance piece to an established outlet, or say, for example, I used to be president of the Fund for Investigative Journalism, and Valeria's on the board now too of FIJ. We're constantly looking at pitches, and in those pitches, in those pitch sessions, we have around us at FIJ, we had 10 of the best investigative reporters in the country evaluating what you're telling us, right? So if you say something along the lines of nothing's been written about this before, or all the stories in the past have been trash about this subject, those evaluators are going to go check it out. they're going to say, oh yeah, let's figure this out. Let's see what's out there. And in many cases, you'll find that the pushback that you'll get from the editors and the evaluators is going to be, well, we found X number of stories that said, a lot of what you're already pitching in your proposal. Is there something new that you can tell us? Is there a new direction the story can go? So, I mean, I think that's what's really helpful, especially with palabra. And we come back to that. I mean, we said at the top that we don't know. I've yet to meet a story that I didn't dislike 100%, right? There's always been something about, and those of you out there who've worked with me will know that I hate the word no. I used to hate hearing it as a reporter. I hate saying it as an editor. So I'm always looking for a way to get you onto the page, onto the screen. If you look at the content of Palabra from its beginning, you can say that what we've brought is a really interesting perspective to a lot of issues that are out there and this is real key, especially for this crowd, from voices who have otherwise not been able to find an audience, right? And hopefully we're providing a platform for you all. And that's what's one of the key things, is that you can even say in your pitch, this is a new perspective from someone who's lived the story, someone who knows the story. If it's a piece, say from the US-Mexico border, you say, hey, I'm of the border, I'm from the border. I personally feel like I have a real keen perspective and a different perspective on matters that affect the US-Mexico border, because I was born in Tijuana, and that's where a lot of my family still lives. So I know the region really well. And so I feel like I can pretty much dive into any subject that involves the border and bring you a new perspective. And if you have that kind of confidence, that should be front and center in your pitch.
Yeah, absolutely. You just reminded me, because sometimes in journalism school, students will ask me, oh, I have DACA, or I am of the same age of other students that are DACA. I don't think I should cover these because I have like a personal feeling about it, or and I'm like, well, who you are means like you're gonna ask questions that no one else will think to ask. So how important is it in the pitch to let the editor know why you are the best person to tell the story?
Yes, I think that's critical. And, the FIJ, I don't know if anybody has ever submitted a proposal to the Fund for Investigative Journalism. Well, FIJ and others like the Pulitzer Center and the McCall Center at the CUNY, which offer grants for investigative and for feature stories. One of the questions that they ask you is, what makes you the best person to do this piece? And this is where that individual voice becomes, it can be important, right? If it's a story about DACA, you could say, you should say, I am DACA, if you are, right? Or members of my family are, or, I know a community that is DACA. And this affords me access to a perspective that perhaps has not been granted the kind of platform that this story needs, right? So it's a way of putting yourself into the story. And I know that busts a lot of the old traditional, norms in journalism where you shouldn't be part of the story unless it's analysis. I think we're in a new era where journalism today has to reflect us, has to reflect our strengths, our community, and what we know. Because the old adage is that you should write what you know. is very true. And I think for us now in the Palabra community and the NAHJ community, hopefully there's an opportunity now for us to write what we know, right?
You know, I used to get really frustrated, Ricardo, that when I realized that there were only like 12 stories or so in the world, right? And I think it was the Greeks or somebody who said that, but it's all about how you tell the story. How do you sort of, when you've been doing this for a long time, how do you keep away your skepticism? How do you pitch freshly?
Yeah.
How do you explore ways into enter a story in a different way?
Yeah, you know, I think that was that, and if we can track them down, some of my former editors at different newspapers where I worked will tell you that I was always a difficult reporter because, and I would tell them up front that I'm always going to be looking for the freshest angle, and perhaps an angle that you're not familiar with or you may not like. And so I'm always looking for that different way of approaching a story. And since Palabra, for example, is not, I'm going to say, is not a publication of record. In other words, we're not publishing breaking stories that happened, you know, like an event that happened, a car chase last night. We're not going to put that in Palabra, then, you know, the next morning. We're about if you take a step back, you can say that Palabra continues to be much more about the how and the why of a story. If you say that there's, you know, the what, who, what, where, when, why, and all of that business, Palabra's focus is the how and the why, with the added advantage of being able to say the who, right? Because in many cases, the who is now the author and the reason why I'm presenting you this story. So, and that's actually kind of an interesting outgrowth of the way I traditionally approached my own journalism. Was what I tried to do was find an advantage that I had that would allow me to bring a new perspective to a story. With a collaborator of mine for many years, Alfredo Corchado from the Dallas Morning News, when we were both in the Mexico City Bureau of the Morning News, we were onto a story that the braceros who worked in the U.S. on contract in the World War II years had been promised that 10% of their salary was going to be held in special savings accounts. And then, of course, when they came back to Mexico, the money was gone. A lot of them were never able to access the money. Well, what Alfredo and I decided is because we knew that community so well. I mean, our fathers and grandfathers were braceros, and we knew where to find them. We knew the lives that they were leading now as older men mostly. We knew how to get at that story. So over time, it took us a while. We were able to find a number of these old guys who still had money that they claimed was coming to them. And it turned out to be a fantastic story. Fast forward 10 years after we wrote that story, the Mexican government admits that they owe them a debt. So, and so what we were able to do with that story was find that story from its source and get to the men who had lived it. At one point in the process of reporting that story, I had asked the mayor of a small town in Aguascalientes in Mexico, I know that the following gentlemen were part of the Bracero program in World War II, and I'm wondering if they're still alive. So and also most of the small towns in Mexico have, the municipios have a radio station. So I asked him to put the call out looking for these gentlemen via the municipio's radio station. Well, when I got to that town, there were probably about 400 people in a palacio waiting for me because they were all families of braceros or were themselves braceros. And they were interested in hearing what was going on and why I wanted to talk to these particular men who were there actually as well. So it turned out to be a great day, and a 2-hour assignment. It ended up being 2 days of doing interviews in this palacio, right? But that's because Alfredo and I knew how to get at the root of this story. So
You are like bringing back really dear memories of the braceros, because I met the bracero story, I guess, like in the 2000s, right? When the government had already agreed to give them money. And so they were organizing to get the money, right? And not everybody was on the list, and they were waiting, and they just had such incredible stories. And it was like, you know, some of them were in their 80s,
Yeah.
like, and then there were relatives too that the family member had passed away, right? But
Right.
again, like stories, they continue, they extend, and then another generation of reporters comes back and picks that up, and we kind of paving the way. So in a way, I think stories sometimes need for us to stay with them,
Mhm.
and for us to have the memory of what was reported before, like such as things that also Alfredo reported in El Paso,
Right.
the situation with the women in Juarez.
Mhm.
I wanted to make just a little interjection here to say that we have about 33% independent journalists, according to the poll, joining us. Somebody that it's like part-time related journalism, 44% NHA members, 28% students. We have editors here, a couple of editors, and a journalism professor. So thank you so much. How awesome that we have editors here.
Yeah.
When we get to the Q&A portion, we may want to hear from some of these editors. You know, feel free to chime in on any additional tips that you want to share, because surely you'll have some. Ricardo, we were talking about also how your pitch is your business card.
Yeah.
Although people
Yes.
don't know.
Yeah, that's a critical thing. I mean, I was before we started here, I had a number of things that I wanted to relate that are important for a pitch, but I think probably paramount in all of this is that this is your first in many cases, if you're new to a publication, if you're new to Palabra, if you're new to any one of the grant making entities out there, it's your first opportunity to show them how well you write and how well you report. Okay. And so if we see a pitch that has some clear errors, and I'm not just talking about, I'm not just talking about questionable statements or questionable assertions that are made in a pitch, but if there's spelling mistakes, grammar mistakes, then the eyebrows start rolling or rising and the eyeballs start rolling. And I can say that that's pretty clear, and it happens everywhere where you pitch. So what's important is to know is that do your best possible writing, all right, in these pitches. And there's that balance I talked about at the beginning of not going on too long and then not on the other end, not giving enough information. Here's two ways to approach it. Each pitch perhaps should come with a short elevator pitch, let's say 150 to 200 words or so, or that tells us, what is the story about? Why are you doing the story? And most of us can answer that. If we know the story well enough, we can answer that pretty clearly and concisely. It's the classic elevator pitch. And then in the same proposal, then you can say, here are more details that you might want to consider as you think about whether you want to accept this story. And then you can lay out a more extensive case for your story in your pitch. And that I would recommend not going beyond a page and a half tops, right? And so I think that helps you reach both sides of the balance, because editors are weighing a lot of different ideas and pitches in a given day, in addition to the busy schedules that they have, right? So they're going to want to see something and say, this is interesting. I just saw something, a statement that that has attracted my attention. I want to know more. And in that same proposal, I can find more, right? So I think that if you have a little bit of both, a concise, this is what the story is about, but then a little bit more in depth of what the story is and how I propose to get it, which is critical.
No, I've been on the other side of this, being the reporter sending the pitches, and guilty of really long things, and well, especially when you already know the editor, you have a little bit more confianza, and so you just like ramble a little bit. Well, maybe I can do this, but I also was thinking I could do that, and that is so great. But at the same time, when your editor sees a really big email and they really want to read it, but they're just so busy, they say, okay, I'll get back to it when I can read it with all my attention. And then it keeps, being postponed and postponed and postponed. I see myself doing that. And so it's really good. So I just really want to advise to really stick to that elevator pitch. And so you could elaborate further in the page, but give a snapshot so they can really quickly scan. Strategy, Ricardo. What to do if you don't hear back, not even a thank you for your pitch, and if your story is really good, maybe you want to send it to someone else, no palabra.
Well, listen, there is some merit to waiting, right, and to being patient, because Valeria, that how busy you are, right, and the other folks who can help you suss through the pitches are also pretty busy. So, as a journalist, if I'm going to submit a proposal to someone, I want to give it, the necessary amount of time. How do you judge what the necessary amount of time is? Well, one thing you can do, and I think that it would actually help establish your confidence about this story, is if in your proposal you indicate that I would like to hear from you within, say, a week, right? Or even less, if you know the editors and they know you, or you have some inkling that you're talking to the right person, is say, please let me know as soon as possible, but I hope we can at least have a conversation about this within a week. That helps you then, I think, establish your confidence in the piece. It also gives the editor who's evaluating your piece the idea that this person's serious and they want to know, right? Because time is money. And so I think if you put palabra on a clock, then that helps us kind of get an idea that this person's serious. Let's move with it and let's evaluate it as soon as possible.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. And I wouldn't be too afraid, especially when it comes to palabra, of being, look, I wanted to bring this back to your attention, because sometimes when editors are working on a special projects, literally 2 weeks can feel like the blink of an eye.
Yeah.
And so maybe they really meant to get back to you, but I'm actually writing here that I got to follow up with Natalie.
Yeah.
One of our editors, and she pitched something and I haven't gotten back to her, and I'm feeling all of the people are coming back to my mind. So don't be afraid. I mean, obviously you don't want to be texting or like emailing every single day, but
Right.
It's okay if you don't find another outlet. We recently had a pitch for a story that right now we have to wait till next year, and they gave us a deadline. And I said, look, right now for that specific bid, we don't have funding. However, we will be interested for next year. If these other wonderful outlets don't get back to you and you still want to come back to us, we could work with this next year.
Yeah.
It's
And by
literally
next
like
year, I mean, we're talking January 1. So that's not far off.
No, it's not far off. I mean, so that's what I was saying at the beginning. This is the time to start thinking, forget about December, because December, you don't want to run stories in December because everybody's distracted. But you could start stories in December. Or you
Yes.
could start your reporting right now for something that will run on January, February. Y I'm just realizing que quizás hay personas aquí que hablan español, y que quiero avisarles que para el próximo webinar vamos a intentar tener una traducción simultánea para que puedan también participar las personas que hablan español.
Y también si quieren, si hay una pregunta en español, pues aquí estamos dispuestos.
Sí, por supuesto. Hoy mismo podemos hacer eso, contestar las preguntas en español.
If I can add one thing and I think this is real critical in your pitch process, do your homework about the outlet. So every single outlet out there has what I call a gatekeeping editor, someone who's in charge of letting the stories into the process, right? Into the evaluation process. Try to find out who that person is, so that you're not sending your pitch to the assistant of the assistant's managing editor, right? Who probably might not and may not have the kind of authority to sign off on a piece or move it farther up the chain. So try to, if you can beforehand, identify who in that outlet is the person who's going to be making the decision whether your piece is going to get a good evaluation. Better yet, if you know who the person who is going to decide whether they take the story or not, that's even better. All right. So you don't waste time sending a pitch to someone who's in HR or someone who doesn't have the kind of editorial authority that you need to make a timely decision on your piece. Right.
Absolutely. And I was just like thinking right now that at one point we're gonna want to get feedback from you. We're probably gonna send you a survey to know, what kind of questions or other things you want us to address. How can we help you better on these webinars? And I mean, I know I can't speak for Ricardo, but I'm sure Ricardo's door is always open.
Yes.
We all want a mentor. We all want someone on our side, or maybe several people that we can go and say, hey, I have this crazy idea. Can I run it by you before I pitch it somewhere else? Or even, can I run it to you before I pitch it to you? As a question, right? So
Right.
Don't be afraid to do that. We don't have to have it all figured out. And the more people that you trust, that you talk to about your ideas, the better they get.
Yeah, no, it's just that's very true. I mean, you have all of us have a trusted circle, I hope, right? Because in reality, that myth of the lone wolf investigative reporter or the solitary writer who's going to go off and bring us the best feature ever, that doesn't exist. We all have networks of people who we rely on for feedback to let me know, is this something, am I nuts here, or is this a good story? And do that before you get to the pitch point, because that helps you hone the story. I'll tell you a little interesting story about the beginning of Palabra. When it was first brought to my attention, and I was asked, what do you need to get this going? My immediate answer was, I need money to pay top-notch copy editors and guest contract editors. I mean, Palabra doesn't have a staff, but Valeria has an incredible team of contributors, of editors, of copy editors who are among the best in the business, really, I think. And if you look at the copy, if you look at our stories, you'll see that that's reflected in the final product. I mean, Palabra is syndicated by Microsoft News and Advanced Local. And the people at Advanced Local told me that the reason why they came to Palabra is they saw the quality of the journalism. And they saw stories that they could lift and put into their own individual outlets around the country. So, so we're serious about having good, strong copy, and that you can expect that you're going to get a good, strong edit and a good, strong copy edit. So if you don't like being copy edited, maybe it's not the best place for you, but hopefully you do.
Yeah. No, I think it's that's another thing. I mean, there's some of you who are editors, and I don't know if you're part already of the Palabra team, but feel free to reach out if you want to freelance edit with us. You could also, it's a different kind of a pitch. We definitely are always looking for editors, sorry, copy editors, translators, and also we take pitches in Spanish. We work with you if you write only in Spanish too, and we start, we have contributors in Latin America also, a lot of people in Puerto Rico. Actually, lately we've been getting a lot of pitches from Puerto Rico. I think it's because, once you publish something, then more people, the word gets out, and then they start coming in. So I think it's a good point now to start inviting the audience. And we could put the Q&A chat up if you're there, so people can ask questions. And while you do that, there is a question already by Lorena in the regular chat. Let me see if I read this right. It says, do you prefer to see data and statistics up front, bullet pointed versus hyperlinked to the source? As far as follow-ups, should we draw the line at 3 or 2? I guess in the pitch.
Right. Well, I'll take a stab, and I think it'd be helpful if I think and instructive if you and Johnny kind of fill in on this one too, just with what you've been seeing and what you're comfortable doing. But again, remember that you don't want to give away the entire story, right? You want to tease us a little bit, but just give us maybe the 2 or 3 most important salient data points that you think help sell the story. And by that I mean, if the story is about data, then give us the top line data point that you might have, right? Because we're going to come back and say, all right, let's look at the methodology to see how you got this, the documentation that backs it up. But you're confident enough to show us 1 or 2 good, solid bullet point pieces. That also goes for the essential facts of the story that you know already. You might just say, I know that X city council has been withholding information from public agendas because I've seen some of it in this document and some of it in this document. You can do a link to that, or you can point out what it is. It doesn't give away the entire story, how you got those documents and what was behind the obfuscation by the city council, because that then becomes the heart of the story. But then as an editor, I'm going to be intrigued and say, wow, this is interesting. Let's roll, so.
Yes, thanks. I would just interject that one thing that I take into account, and I always tell journalists to take into account, is the audience. Not just the media or the medium that you're going to be, because it could be radio, it could be TV, digital, it could be print, and they all have different nuances. So you consider the medium, but you also consider the audience. Because again, maybe palabra is geared towards something more elaborate and investigative, as opposed to when you think TV, you think something short. And sometimes you think about what is the audience going to take once they've seen the story. What did they learn? Or how did we open up their minds? I don't know. There's many different ways of seeing it. But I would just bring that into the whole picture, because I think sometimes we need to think of, okay, who are we targeting?
Right.
And of course, palabra has a real clear target, so it helps.
And that's a good, strong point, I think, Valeria, because as you well know, I mean, we know, and I know, given your experience and your background, a lot of strong broadcast journalists. And I think that's also being shown in how you've shaped Así Fue, the podcast, right? And how that is going to evolve. And the fact is that also Palabra has been able to publish some pretty interesting short videos by video journalists. And a lot of those, all of those have come to Palabra as original ideas or a new spin on something that has that they see out there that needs a good visual storytelling, a piece of storytelling. And those videos have run anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong there, but I think that's about,
Yeah, 5 to 15 minutes. I mean, absolutely. We are also working with videographers, also photojournalists reach out to us with pitches, and then the story could start with a documentary. It could start and then become like a whole package, right? With digital and a team of people coming together. Photojournalists are on the trenches often, and they're also they are journalists. They're not your photographers, just a note to the writers. And so they could also be the ones initiating, right? And then that's another idea out there for you to make those partnerships. I wanted to mention here that we have a question from Damali Gonzalez. And Damali, I want you to know that we did receive your pitch, and actually I have shared it with Ricardo. And we've been just like initiating the conversation, and we will get back to you. Yes, you're in my list also. And Damali is
and part of the question for Damali is she wants to know if you have to be an NHA member.
Yeah.
What would be the answer to that?
I'm sorry, still getting over some, not COVID, but something. Yes, Damali, the reason why Palabra was created was to support the members of NHA. So we encourage journalists to become members of NHA because we're part of the organization. But it doesn't matter basically where you are in the country or what identity you have, what color you have, or race, or how you identify. You could be part of NHA. And if you do have a financial concern, you could let us know and we can help waive that for you. It's not our goal to be like making money out of freelancers or anything like that. So oftentimes we waive the fee for the first year to help out. Yeah. Yes, I see that you're excited that we're gonna get back about the pitch. Yes. Y qué bueno que nos estés. Are you in Puerto Rico right now, Tamali? Because I think Brooklyn. Okay. Okay. Sí. We have questions on the Q&A chat. There we go. Lupe. Okay. Yeah, she's wondering if we recommend or have a pitch format of how to write a pitch to editors. We actually don't have it, but we could probably help you find one. Ricardo?
Yeah, well, listen, I think because of our experience, Valeria and my experience with the Fund for Investigative Journalism, look at the questions that FIJ asks you. That's fij.org, and the kind of materials and the questionnaire that accompanies that submission process, and that gives you an idea of the kinds of things that we might be looking for, right? And of course, FIJ is for investigative pieces, but I think the same thing applies for a good strong feature or a good strong analysis. If you're going to pitch us an analysis, I kind of need to be convinced in a few sentences that what you're saying holds water or is a strong argument, and then the you in that pitch then becomes super important, right? So because then I need to know why you and your analysis are the best person to give me that analysis. Boast about yourself and tell me about why you're the best equipped to do this particular story. So yeah, there isn't a per se form or structure that's present on the Palabra website, but there are models out there for how you might want to structure your pitch. You can look at FIJ, you can look at the McGraw Center at CUNY, which has a really good submission process. Also, the Pulitzer Center for crisis reporting has a pretty clear and transparent process for pitching stories. So.
Yeah, at the journalism school, we did give a format to the students, and they were, that I recall a couple of key questions, why you are the best person to tell the story, why now? Some of it was geared towards television, so sometimes they'll ask you, a list of who will be some of the key voices in the story. And I will advise in that case, if you tell us who they are, don't make up somebody that doesn't exist. If you have to make up some ideal person, chances are you're not quite ready to pitch, and then you're going to be really struggling looking for this ideal subject that you don't have. So go with things that you have in hand. So why now? Why is this relevant for the audience? That's a really important question. Who else has done something on this? It's another component. And then your elevator pitch, your basically your NAT graph. From the very beginning, I know that NAT graphs can be so hard and elusive to write, like the heart of your story, and sometimes they change. But that elevator pitch is almost like your NAT graph. And as you go to write your story, you go back to the pitch and you're like, okay, why was I writing this story in the first place? And there's your NAT graph. Yes. Yes. That NAT graph will guide you. The more distilled and defined the NAT graph is from the very beginning, from the pitching process, the easier it will be for you to be on the same page with your editor and to also sort of orient your reporting.
Yeah, I used to, and I still do this when I talk to reporters who are going to pitch a story, and even reporters who might be in the reporting process, we've already accepted a story, and they tell me, "Oh my gosh, I'm a little lost," or "This is changing on me," and how do we pivot? And I always come back to that essential question, and it bugs the heck out of you can ask Alfredo and all these other folks that, hey, but this is what I always ask: why the hell are you writing the story? Why are you doing this story now? right? And then you can really know whether I know the story well enough to put this out there. And most people, when I ask that question, they're challenged, and they give me a beautiful, concise answer. I said, that's the story. Let's remember that as we go forward in the reporting. So, or in your pitch proposal.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've been in some stations where they actually have a format, and usually they start, let's say, with a title, maybe a subtitle, maybe a synopsis, because a synopsis is also that short paragraph
Right.
that describes everything as you envision it. Because sometimes as you are doing or working towards that story, maybe you uncover something that changes that original pitch, and might make it more interesting, or it might give it more relevance, or it might make you change your mind and say, you know what, I was looking at it from the wrong angle, let's switch gears. So that is also really, really important. Some stations would also say, how would you sell this story?
Mhm.
Because in many stations, you're thinking, okay, how are you going to take that pitch also and translate it into a promo, a
Right.
15-second promo or a 30-second promo? And that is also part of the pitch too, because it kind of tells you, okay, this is why this story is important, too, because if you're clear, you can sell it.
And a note on what Johnny's talking about and what Valeria brought up earlier is just the beauty of inviting photographers or videographers to pitch a piece. They're one of a couple of the strongest pieces that we've had in Palabra, I think, in the last few years, have been brought to us by photographers, where we've actually found the photographer had a really great idea, and we've brought in a reporter or a writer to put them together to produce some great journalism. So I love working with photographers. I've always respected and videographers as well. So I'm always sure that every level, every kind of professional journalist is going to come up with a really damn good idea. And so don't count yourself out just because you're a photographer and say, oh, they don't want my idea, right? No, I think Valeria is going to be, hopefully geared up to be getting pitches from a whole bunch of people now. So
Yeah, we love getting pitches for photographers, because usually they already have the photos, and like a picture speaks more than 1,000 words, right? And so you're like looking at it, and it sells itself. If the photo, the story is there and the photojournalist is good, it really it's just a matter of like, can we pay you what you deserve, for the size of the project. We have another question that comes from Saida Pagan, and we know Saida Pagan very well because she's one of our frequent contributors. She's an award-winning journalist that is in Los Angeles. We are very proud of the work she does. She also has a background on television. She is also an educator. She's wondering if in 2023 there was an emphasis on stories about education. Will that still be the case in 2024? Saida, we will continue to do stories on education because we have a grant right now that's for 2 years that puts a lot of resources on that area. However, we are really working hard on getting more funding for general assignment stories. And I know you cover a lot of culture and entertainment in a very deep way. And, we want to continue doing that and also support stories that have to do with other topics, health, environment. We have a robust contributing network in Latin America with a lot of good stories that have connections to the United States. We want to continue supporting them. They're not on education, so we're really, really working hard on getting that. We have Johnny here, no pressure, who's a board member.
And I want to say that 2024, when I see 2024, what I immediately think is politics. It's an election year. El voto Latino, Hispanic vote, of course, that's going to be key. And I know it's going to be key here in Arizona, swing state. So, as freelancers, take that to your community. See how the Hispanic vote is going to be covered in your community.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure there's plenty of stories that you can find about politics.
That's very clear. I mean, I think that's a very strong suggestion and actually a strong idea, Johnny, because there are so many stories out there that can focus on the upcoming 2024 vote, and involving the Latino community or us as Latino journalists. For example, I mean, there's so many parts of this country that are red states, red districts, red communities. But in reality, if you look at the demographics, they're dominated by Latinos. Either people who have just moved there, say North Carolina, for example. Look at parts of Idaho, and you see the demographic change that's going on. It's not been reflected so far in the vote. I'm curious as to why, and are there local activists who are dedicated to making a change there? One of the most eye-opening stories we had in Palabra was in the last go-around, the last big national election. We did a story about two women who, Latinas, who nobody would think that they might have a chance to be strong candidates. And we told their stories about how they finally decided to rise up from just community activism and seek office, right? And we told the story about what the outcome was for both of them in their particular races. That became a hell of a story. So yes, politics, I think, is a very strong thing for 2024.
Yeah. Absolutely, absolutely. And knowing all the misinformation and disinformation that there is circulating in our communities, and Palabra is published bilingually. Definitely those are stories that we're going to be interested on. And we don't look at things in terms of, who's ahead, who's behind, right? Like Ricardo was saying earlier on, we're looking at the why, we're looking at the how, and then the who's of those stories, right? It's not, cover the horse race.
Yeah.
For that, there's plenty of other media. We occupy a different space. Palabra. I just posted in the chat a resource that, Damali, I misspelled your name, that Damali shared on freelancing, and I think it might have a template there for pitching. Thank you so much. I want to remind you that you could put questions on the Q&A chat or on the regular chat. We still have.
While we're waiting for the next question, I think I was going to point out to go back to Saida. I mean, I think more people ought to reach out to Saida and ask her, hey, how did you get into this? Because now when I see a pitch from Saida, my confidence level is high, right? And I believe you would say that too, Valeria, that because Saida has learned how to work with us. She knows what Valeria needs and might want to see as a story. And she's mastered that process of getting a story from pitch to publication. And she's also shaped that particular thing that she does out of Hollywood and out of LA and in the entertainment zone into a signature beat for Palabra. She's won awards and all that. So I think, Saida could be a really good example for a lot of folks. Yeah. So.
And I would invite you also to subscribe to Palabra. Just Google Palabra and you'll get there, and also to subscribe to the podcast. Así fue. So, because that sometimes when you get into the habit of reading it and listening to what Palabra is, then you get a better sense of if you have a pitch of, what Palabra is looking for. So that helps.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, thank you. I was going to add now the newsletter link here also, because that keeps you posted. And also we co-publish, and we're really open if you are have another editor and you want to combine resources, and maybe they want to publish bilingually, but they don't have the resources. We do that a lot, and we try to share the resources to get the stories out there and to get them to more people. Yeah, I was going to say, like, once an editor knows you and you build a good reputation, that it becomes really easy to pitch.
Yeah.
It's night and day. You send them a line and they're like sold. So, I mean, sometimes not always like that. You got to send them sometimes more things, but they definitely, like, they see your name and they reply, or, you have their cell phone sometimes, Saida. So if they don't reply, you could like reach them in a number of other platforms and they'll get back to you.
Yeah. You know, one thing too about the why palabra from the beginning, and I think it's all about providing a service, providing a platform for NAHJ's growing community of freelancers, right? But not just to provide a platform for publishing. In many cases, freelancers for Palabra have gone on, I think because of the work for Palabra, have gone on to some pretty interesting, pretty cool full-time jobs. They've been enticed back into, full-time journalism based on the stories that they've done for Palabra. And there's quite a roster of people who I think have landed some pretty cool jobs after their time, contributing to Palabra. So keep that in mind. It could
I
be a
would
good
also,
platform for you.
and I would say the opposite too, because many times people feel, or journalists might feel constrained when they work at a particular outlet because they want to grow or because they have a different point of view and they want to expand on their skills. And sometimes those skills don't fit within the organization that you're working. So they branch out into freelancing. And that I think is key for Palabra, because Palabra gives them that opportunity to do something that it's a passion of them, of theirs. So I invite them to maybe do that first pitch with Valeria, and sometimes you kind of polish the craft as you go along too, because we all have to start somewhere. And like Valeria was saying with Ricardo, we are all sounding boards too sometimes. And even though we don't know it all, we might know somebody who can help you out. So
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we are a space for people to experiment. I don't think somebody was we were discussing the other day with our photo editor, with Yunuen, about what is a typical Palabra story. And I can tell you when it's pitched, but there is not exactly like one template. It's more about the spirit of how you go about what's going to be told and the experimentation, because we do take essays, we do take analyses, we take op-eds, but we're not rigid in the sense that, oh, no, this is going to be a certain newswire kind of style, and you can do narrative, or you can experiment with, having some parts in Spanish. I mean, we haven't done that yet, going back and forth between languages, but we're always trying to look at each story as something new and unique, and to see like, okay, can we have graphics with it? Can we have a documentary going along? Or do we do a photo essay? So you could be part of that creative process, which I think is really fun. And it's not always available when the publication is much bigger, or there is not a focus on the mentorship and the difficult word I'm going to say in Spanish, camaradería. How do you say that in English? Camaradería.
Fellowship, friendship, community, right?
Fellowship, yeah.
Fellowship describes it
Yeah.
really well.
Yeah.
Thank you, Damali. You have to go. I'm checking and seeing if there's any questions, but I don't see a whole lot more. And I know maybe some of you thought this was only going to last an hour. I see some are jumping, saying goodbye, and we appreciate you being here. So I am going to reiterate a few publicity things to create more space to see if there's any more questions. But if there's not, we're probably going to wrap up a few minutes early. So you have in the chat the link to subscribe to Palabra. We have an upcoming webinar on fact-checking on November 15th, at 2 p.m. PT. Now, at that time, are we going to change? Is that
Yes,
when
November 5th, the time changes. So that's why.
So is that
2 Pacific will still be 3-hour time, Mountain.
Okay. So it would be at 5 p.m. ET. I always use ET for everything, so that way it's 2 p.m., 5 p.m. 6 p.m. Oh, Okay, I confuse everybody. We will let you know.
We will let you know.
We're gonna be advertising, but just like checking your calendars, November 15th. Fact checking, it's like such a topic. And we're gonna have Julie Colasso joining us, which is like the lead fact checker at Palabra. It could be very obscure, or if you've never done it, you're like, wait a minute, I didn't know that I have to do this. In reality, we all should be doing our fact checking as we go along with our reporting, right? Verify all your data, verify all the names, double check the quotes with your recording, record the quotes. Go back and check on the statistics, and don't take at face value what the sources tell you. Neighborhoods, even if you think that you know that you are in a certain neighborhood, it's basically double checking every single fact. And I want Julie to share with you some tips on how to do that effectively, and how you can like present annotated document that is easy to read, so you're not like at the last minute trying to figure out. It's also about organization, right? So you're not like, where is that folder, because that happened to me in the past, right? So you have an organized project all along for everything that has to do with the reporting of a particular story. And at any minute, if anything is ever challenged, you could produce the fact to prove it. That's really important. We do it to avoid inaccuracies, to avoid misinformation, but also to bulletproof your work. So that's going to be a really exciting panel.
Right. One of I was going to say, one of the cool things that Valeria has done with Palabra is created this infrastructure for the story process. So it's not just fact checking, but also if you have an investigative piece, for example, or it's an accountability story that relies on data, or there's some kind of those kinds of statistical components, it's not only going to be fact checked, but it's also going to be reviewed by a lawyer before it's published. And the great thing is that we've been able to we've secured the services of some really top-notch lawyers in the field who are doing it on a pro bono level, because they understand and they support the mission of Palabra. Which brings me back to that original point. One of the reasons why Palabra was created is because, like many of you, we know we were seeing the frustration that many of you had as freelance journalists, working in a vacuum, not having all the information you need from a publication, lousy rates, and God knows when you were going to get paid. So you had to be your own enforcer, right? So it's a frustrating line that you're in as independent journalists. And so we hopefully wanted to help you overcome some of those by providing good rates, competitive rates for your pieces, for your work, and paying you on time. And also an inclusive environment where you're going to work with editors whose goal it is to get your story published. So
yeah, the support is key, because then you can actually focus on the content.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm very happy that you all joined. I invite you to follow up with us, to work on your pitches, or run a line or a couple of ideas. We are on your side. We're not here to be like super judgmental of like, oh, that was like completely off the mark. That's not who we are at Palabra. We're here to help you grow, to help you try new things, to help you reconnect with journalism if you were disconnected. That's kind of like the family and community that we want to build with Palabra. So anyways, Johnny, thank you so much for kicking off what I call the Palabra method master classes. And Ricardo, thank you so much for like giving your time. Ricardo, also has another title, a day job, as it's like PBS public editor, right?
Right.
Keeps him really busy, and nevertheless, he is like one of our most important editors, our founder, and he's always right there checking a lot of the pitches. They also get screened by Ricardo and some of our other editors. So most of the stories that are there, Ricardo had a hand.
No, hey, I'm glad to do it. I mean, this has been a passion play of mine since we started, So I don't mind giving the time necessary to help. If you have a good, strong pitch, if you have some doubts about your pitch or whatever, you can trust Valeria to help you with that. And sometimes that might include bringing me into the process just to give it a second or third set of eyes behind everything. All right.
I see that Diane Solis was joining us.
Ah, our original writer.
I believe it's the one and only.
Yes.
It's so good to have you here. Well, with that, we're going to wrap, but you'll hear from us. You'll get a copy. She says, hi, homies. Okay. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Cynthia. This is really awesome. And feel free to, hi, Mira. Feel free to send us
Yes.
ideas of other webinars that you want us to host, of other topics that Palabra can assist you with as we carry on into next year. So, con eso.
Con
It
eso
is
nos
even a
vamos.
tocaya, Leon.
Johnny, yo no me callo nunca.
I just
Esa.
no,
Wrap it
and
up,
I, and
wrap
I
it
and
up.
I just want to thank you. I want to thank you both because, just by Valeria being here in Arizona, I said this, put two and two together, and I said we should be doing this. We should be doing this because Palabra, needs to have more. I want more people to know about Palabra. I really believe in the project. I'm so thankful to Ricardo because he started it all. He was the original originator, I would say. But I do think that the project is so top-notch quality that more people need to discover, more people need to come to it. And that's really how the whole thing came about, that we wanted to have this for Palabra so that more people can learn about it and take advantage of it. And we want to see it grow. We want to see it grow even more. It's been 4 years. Maybe next year when we're at the 5-year mark, it'll be even bigger and better. And that's what it's all about. And of course, for us, I would say old timers, we are mentors. We are mentors too. We want to give back. We want other people to feel the excitement and the passion. And there's room for everybody. There's room for everybody because there's NPR, there's PBS, there's all the other stations, NBC, ABC, and we all have different target audience. So there's room for everybody. And I do want people who are freelancers to feel that love and support, like Valeria was saying, la camaradería. Here it is, and we are here for you. So thank you guys for supporting me in this new venture. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank everybody for your time.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Thank you.
everybody. Have a good rest of the week.
Thanks.
Right.